Welcome to With Creative Company,
a podcast where we dive deep in all things business as creatives.
We give our personal take on things that actually move the needle,
and also chat with entrepreneurs about their experiences in running a business.
I'm Jordan.
I'm Mayme.
Let's get creative. Hello, hello.
Hi. What are we talking about today, Jordan?
Today, we are talking about, I think this is probably my favorite subject, actually. Okay. We're talking about what is an ideal client.
Yeah, I think it is a fun subject. I don't know. I feel like you're going to have more on this than me because you seem excited and passionate about it.
I do. I feel like it's something that I've learned more recently. And it just gets me really jazzed.
Do you think discovering what your ideal client is has affected your business?
100%.
Okay. I think to start, I think a fun place to start would be chatting about what we think an ideal client isn't.
Ooh.
Maybe because I think that like any buzzword term has a lot that comes with it that maybe people expect. Mm-hmm. And I think sometimes even in the art community, it can sound a little pretentious.
Yeah.
So what do you think an ideal client is not?
I'm going to really just blow you out of the water. I have to be honest. I don't think an ideal client is the person who books your highest package. I don't think that defines them as an ideal client. Mm-hmm. I think someone who's not an ideal client, this is a bit more practical, but specifically with wedding photography, we have contracts. I think a lot of businesses do about their work. I think someone who's really trying to change your contract is not an ideal client.
Yeah.
I think it's good to have checks and balances of yourself, of getting a professional opinion about a contract and what that entails, especially depending on the kind of work that you're doing. Whether you're doing business with a brand, they obviously have some licenses to that, to use that for their financial gain. But yeah, I think if you've done your due diligence and you've created a good contract, I think someone who's trying to change that is not my ideal client.
And I think an ideal client is not someone like an ideal client is not a certain aesthetic of person.
100%.
I think a lot of times when you look at people's like descriptions of what they maybe are leaning towards when they're describing their ideal client, sometimes it kind of feels like we're describing an aesthetic or a type of person.
Yeah.
Which I think can be a little bit dangerous, honestly.
Yeah, it really can.
So what is your ideal client?
Thank you for asking.
You're like, I'm so excited.
So my ideal client is the client that trusts me and trusts the vision that we've talked about, trusts me to do my job, and trusts sometimes the game time decisions that we have to make. But the biggest, and I'll give you an example. I'm a wedding photographer, so a lot of my examples are wedding photography related, but I think it goes across the board.
Other areas.
We were shooting a wedding, and we had a situation where she wanted some formal portraits taken, certain spot. And I was just very honest with her. And I said, can we change this? Because this is not the best lighting. And she looked at me and said, I trust you. Yeah. Let's do it. Let's change. Yeah. And they were still probably some of my favorite clients ever, just because it was an all-around great experience and great day. But that really started making me think and realizing that it's not about, like I said earlier, just who's booking the highest package, but the fact that they trusted me in my vision, trusted me in my profession, in my professional opinion, and also giving them the result that they want.
Yeah.
It was huge for me.
Yeah.
It changed the way that I look at clients, I think.
Really?
And like I think a lot of the times we post our work, try to maybe the aesthetic that we want, right? So we take thousands of images and deliver hundreds of images and only post like one or two of them to attract a certain type of client. And I think after that, I started focusing more on attracting that type of client instead of maybe the aesthetic type of client that I had been wanting.
So what are steps that you take to try to attract that type of client?
That is a really great question. But before I answer that, you got to answer me. What is your ideal client?
Mine is going to be a little more ping-pongy.
Okay.
I've got a few different things that I look for that I know are going to put me on the right track. Mm-hmm. I also will say I'm not the kind of person, my business is not in a place where if someone's not my quote-unquote ideal client, I'm not going to work with them.
Yeah.
I know there are certain businesses that get to a place where they can do that. Mm-hmm. But I will say I think overall my brand attracts mostly people that I really enjoy working with. So that's been a huge plus. Mm-hmm. So I have a few things. One is I like joyful people who are genuine. There is nothing that makes a wedding day more stressful for me than if the couple isn't enjoying it and isn't wanting to enjoy it. And it's different if you have like emotions on the day of the wedding. I've had brides that I love who were so much fun, who like burst into tears over something. Right. That's totally different. But like I can just tell when a couple is excited to be married. And that's a big thing. Same thing for like family photos or portraits. Like it's not a wedding, but I want to know that we're having a good time. I don't want it to feel stressful and like
forced to be there.
Yes. Sometimes there's a 5-year-old that really doesn't want to be there, but that's their problem.
True.
And then I think that leans into the next thing, which is I genuinely want people who, while they respect my work, care more about the moment and the experience of what's happening than the photos. Especially for a wedding. I feel like I'm leaning into my ideal clients for weddings right now. I have a more documentary style. I'm not too extreme in that category, but it's definitely more documentary. And the more someone is worried about getting certain shots or recreating certain photos or having certain things show up in their gallery, the less I'm able to document their actual wedding.
Yeah.
And that also typically means that they're interacting with me more, and I want to take a more fly on the wall approach. And so when I can just be in the room, seeing what's existing, seeing your bridesmaid help you out with something.
Yeah.
Like I don't want to help you button your dress. I'm not gonna, because it's not about how perfect the dress looks for the photos. It's about getting the photo of who helped you button your dress. Mm-hmm. So that's a big one for me.
Yeah.
And then lastly, definitely leaning into what you're saying, like people that trust me, and especially trust me in the areas where we're being a little more creative.
Yeah.
Are we okay to get a little dirty? Are we okay for you to let your kids run around and like have a good time? Family photos can be chaos and look gorgeous.
Yeah.
And I'm okay with that. The chaos, it's an hour of my time.
Right.
I don't care how chaotic it is because I know what I'm seeing. And what I'm seeing is your kids be kids.
Yeah.
Versus like if I have a client who has specific types of photos in mind and like they want their kids to look a certain way and represent a certain way, it just limits what we can do.
Yeah.
So
and it's
like
not really authentic, right?
Yeah.
Yeah. You lose a little bit of authenticity.
Yeah, and I want everyone's work to look like them, But like I said, that ping-ponged a little bit. You had a very like structured thing, and mine is a little more like
Well, it's great because it connects everything. Mm-hmm. That's true. Because I agree with all those statements too. Yeah. So we can go back to that question. What was your question again? What are the steps I take?
What are the steps that you take? Because you said that you've taken steps to attract an ideal client. So what does that look like for you?
I think the biggest thing that I've made a change in, kind of when I told you back to that, it kind of changed the way I viewed clients. And again, then changed the way how I wanted to attract those clients. I think a big part of it is in that first call that we have. I think obviously social media, I don't lean into it as much. I think I try to talk a little bit more about on our website if people make it that far. But also really that first call is huge emphasis on, I want to know them and their priorities for their day. But I also feel like it's fair to explain who we are and what our mission statement is, what we find important.
What is your mission statement?
I think I mentioned it last time, but it's so that the bride and groom can be present on their wedding day.
Okay.
And I think in order for them to be present, they have to trust. And not just us.
Yeah.
I tell this to every bride. I'm like, you have to trust every single vendor that you hire.
Yeah.
It's super important. And I think it goes across, like if you have a huge marketing campaign, like you better trust that all the people that are a part of that are going to do their job, do it to the best of their ability, and make it a successful launch or make it a successful push, whatever that looks like.
It's across the board. If you're hiring a dentist, you got to trust that they know how to do a root canal.
Right. Right. It's true. It's really across all businesses. And so that is such a huge part of, kind of bringing in that communication too, of explaining who we are and what our goal is for that day. And yeah, again, kind of what you said of making the photos. Yes, they're important. Absolutely. That's what you're paying us for, right? But what's more important is there's a moment that's happening that we get to capture. So yeah, I think that's like what I try to do mostly on the calls or if we meet with them for coffee and things like that, finding out more about them and kind of explaining that what we do with that information and what that looks like played out on a wedding day.
Yeah.
So I think that's our step. What about you?
What do I do to attract? It's similar. Again, not in a place where if someone's not my ideal client, that I'm like, well, see you later.
So you've never fired a client?
Expectations? No.
I've
have never.
One time.
Really? No, I've never really had a client give me reason to.
That's nice.
And I think we did touch on this a little bit in our first episode as well. I think sometimes when you have clear boundaries communicated up front, you kind of get rid of some of those people who are a little more straining. And I've definitely had clients that were harder to work with because our expectations did not align. But typically in those situations, I adjust my expectations and I adjust the way I know my gallery is going to look for that client. Like they're just going to get a different type of image and they chose to go that route. But I don't want to shoot every wedding that way because I would burn out really quickly.
Yeah.
And I did for a while and it burned me out really bad.
Yeah.
So I do think my website is a good place for people to start to see kind of the whole story of things. A lot of my phrases on my website lean into the fact that I'm stealing moments. It's about empathy. It's about connection. And I feel like that speaks to what people are expecting. From there, I have found that for a long time, I had this like mental block where I didn't send people whole galleries when they inquired. And I think it's because I was like nervous for them to see a whole gallery. Maybe it wouldn't live up to what they thought my weddings would look like. I don't know. I don't know what that was all about. But one of the first things they get in my email is like a link to my gallery page. And they don't see every single gallery I deliver. If something's really off the wall and not within my normal range, it's not going to be publicly viewed. But they can basically look at any gallery I've shot in the last 6 months.
Wow.
And just see what I'm doing. And I feel like that helps a lot because they're realizing I'm not sending them like an ultra curated portfolio.
Right.
They've seen that.
Right.
And then they can go through someone's whole wedding day and see, oh, this is what she's going to take photos of on a wedding day.
That's amazing.
Also, an ideal client, I forgot this, is someone who lets me deliver a heck of a lot of black and white photos.
I love it. The specifics.
Yes. But I don't know how to filter for that. I just include a lot of black and white in my galleries in my portfolio and
That's great.
Hope for the best.
Timeless.
So, have you had an ideal client? Like, how has that impacted your work when you've had one? You've kind of described that initial client, but like since then?
Since then, I think it's become like it's kind of ping-pongy, but also like a ladder, right? Like they trust you, which gives you confidence. And then that confidence can lead to better work, can lead to, oh, I know that they trust me, so I can be creative and I can do these things, and I can kind of maybe take a risk that I wouldn't want to, or say, hey, let's walk over to this little spot, and no, you just moved you here, but let's go over there. I definitely think it is nothing but a good thing. At least in my situation, I think it's going to always end up with better work because you have that confidence. And I think as an artist, you or a creative, you put yourself out there. And I think that's the scariest part is to put your work out there and hope that people like it. Right. So it's kind of like a real life. Hey, I like your work. Let's keep going. Let's see what you can do.
Yeah.
So yeah, I think that's.
I feel like I've had so many clients that I just love working with. Like, I'm trying to think. I tend to lean towards smaller weddings. I wouldn't say all of my bookings are like elopements, but I would say most of my clients have less than 100 guests. And they typically are kind of like a DIY style.
Yeah.
Not too far. They might have a wedding day coordinator, but I shoot lots of backyard weddings. I love that. And again, even though I don't think I'm the best maybe at marketing to that, the majority of my clients do lean that direction, and that's what I enjoy. To the fact that when I get thrown into like a bigger wedding day, I can totally handle it, but I'm sometimes like, wow, this is so much
Production.
But I had I'm trying to think, like a couple years ago, I shot a really unique wedding at a restaurant in Germantown. And I literally talk about that wedding and those clients.
Yeah, I was about to say, you've
all the
told me about
time.
it.
But it's just because I showed up, I photographed details, like easy peasy. Then we had tons of time dedicated to what they wanted for their details and for their like formal photos. We had time to do that. It was not stressful. They weren't stressed about it. And then I just photographed their event, and like, you really would have thought I wasn't there.
Yeah.
I mean, nobody was trying to, even their guests were my ideal clients. Nobody was posing for me. People were just hanging.
Yeah.
And it was a really unique event that was very dedicated to them and who they are as a couple instead of what you would expect from a wedding.
How did you get that client?
How did I get that client?
Word of mouth, Instagram? How'd you get it?
I think it might have been Instagram.
So you must have been doing something, right?
But I am not sure. I'm not 100% certain.
Yeah.
I think the majority of my clients come through word of mouth, and then my second biggest thing is Instagram. So, but I also this year has been a real win for clients too. I haven't had a single wedding this year for my own clients that I haven't just absolutely loved. But I've also this year only shot with people that I knew outside of photography, which added this really cool layer of showing up to weddings and knowing half of the guests, knowing the bridesmaids, knowing the mom, like the type of photos you can get when you already know people and you're already their friend, and then they're not like thinking about the fact that you're there.
Yeah.
I love that. That's
amazing.
really fun.
It's a layer of trust.
Yes.
They know you already.
It's just fun. I love showing up to a reception and seeing former couples.
Yeah.
There. I'll give a shout out. Some of my favorite clients ever. A few years ago, really early in my wedding photography journey, I shot a wedding for this couple named Holly and Carson. And we had worked together a few different times before that. And we just always had a blast. Yeah. Then they got married. And then I think I shot weddings for Catherine and Katie and Amber. I think 4. No, it might have just been the 3. I'm trying to remember if one of them was a bridesmaid or not. One of them might have just been a guest. Anyway, I went through her bridesmaids basically.
It's so much fun.
And it was so great. It's so great because then I show up to the next wedding and everyone's like, oh my gosh, Mayme's here. And we know each other. And it's, I love that. I love, those are all my ideal clients. I've had a lot of them over the years, but those are some of the top ones. And then anytime I can be friends with someone after a wedding, which is not something I market towards. I am not, hey, hire me to be your photographer and we'll be best friends.
Yeah.
But I have had some friends come out of working together and I love that.
Yeah. And then it's like a genuine connection too.
Yeah.
You're choosing to be that.
And not to talk too much, but I'll get off weddings for a second.
No. Yeah, let's do it.
I have clients that I have done family photos for years and years and years and years. And those bring me so much joy. Just because I get to see their family grow. It feels very authentic to like be back time and time again and for things to be different each year. Like there's a new kid or there's a pregnancy or there's a new house or anything. That is so fun for me to then also tackle it differently each time.
Yeah.
And like I said, those are families that bring a lot of joy, bring a lot of chaos, and they don't have a lot of expectations. Because I definitely have other families where it's a little bit more like, here's what we need. And that's great. I understand that. Like you want your Christmas cards, but those families I have that we just have a good time for 30 minutes, I'm here for it. I love it. Nice. I love it so much.
I love it. I want to talk about the client that I had to fire.
Okay, yeah, please do.
I won't get too specific, but I guess...
No, get very specific in the details. Don't give names.
No names. It was a wedding, and they inquired. I sent them the pricing guide, had a call. Everything was great. It seemed really, really awesome. At a venue that I've shot at multiple times.
Okay.
The vibes were great. Like, really excited about it. They did ask for a discount.
Okay.
And I was very wary of that. I really do believe that you should believe in your pricing.
Did they have a reason for asking for the discount?
They just had a certain budget in mind.
Oh, okay.
Yeah.
Yeah.
But I do think that there's always, you're your own business owner and you get to make those decisions. So I didn't feel right about it, but I did give them a discount. And then from there, it just went downhill.
Do you feel like they were nice until they realized that they could kind of break into your boundaries a little bit?
Yes, I think so.
Interesting.
And I will say there was a contract involved. I never signed it and they never signed it. So I guess technically they weren't a client yet. But they were well on their way.
Good for you, though, because then you could fire them.
Exactly. So that's exactly what happened. I sent them the contract and I got it back in an email, PDF scans. They had printed it out, marked out multiple full sections of the contract, wanted to rewrite sections of the contract, wanted to do all of these things. And again, when you're dealing with weddings, you're also dealing with a lot of parents, depending on the price of your packages and things like that. And so it was a parent situation. And I actually had multiple phone calls with these parents. They asked to be on a phone call with me and tell me how terrible my contract was and how unfair it was and how all these things happened. And so I felt like I did a good job of listening to their concerns. I did not make any promises. I didn't say I was going to do anything. I did get off the phone and I looked for help. I sent it to some people that I admire and I trust, and also wanted a professional opinion of, again, hey, I'm just checking myself. I'm just making sure. I've never had anybody do this at any point, and I've had previous clients that were lawyers, so I feel like it was okay.
Yeah.
You know? It was kind of strange.
What kind of stuff were they wanting removed from your contract?
The biggest two things that they were really not okay with was liability. They wanted me to be liable for everything in case somebody fell while taking a photo or anything like that.
Okay. See, the closest I've ever had to that was I had a client whose husband was a lawyer, and they requested I change one phrase in my liability clause, but honestly, it was probably better.
Right.
I did leave it for all my other clients, though. I didn't. It was just basically saying that, like, I'm not liable for anything unless it was like for venue damage. If it was my negligence that damaged something at the venue, then that would be my responsibility. Right. And that's all they wanted clarified. And I felt like it was just because they were doing a good job reading my contract that I maybe didn't do a good job writing.
Well, yeah, and again, I wanted to check the same thing. I wanted to make sure, am I asking too much of these things? And I mean, we're licensed and insured,
That's so reasonable, though.
So reasonable, right? They have to get insurance for that venue. I know that venue, so I know for a fact they had to get insurance for that venue. So it was just very odd. It was that, and then it was being able to use their images on my website and social media. They were really not okay with that. Which, again, is another topic. There are, especially in this town, you may come across famous people or celebrities that are attending or maybe even shooting their wedding. I don't know. But so there's ways to deal with that. And I think every photographer has their certain way of dealing with it. But they were just appalled that I would assume that I could use their pictures on my website, and they had asked for to view galleries as well. And I was like, well, that's the thing, right? If I couldn't use any of the images, how would people know that I'm a wedding photographer? This is what I do.
No, that makes sense.
So those were the two main things. And after a phone call, one of the parents had mentioned the possibility if we were to go to court after the wedding. And that's when I said, I think this is the last red flag, and I'm going to call it.
You had a lot of patience in that situation. I think I would have scooched myself out of there even earlier.
Like I said, checks and balances. I want to make sure I'm doing the right thing. I want to make sure that I am not taking advantage of people. But when that was mentioned, I spoke with my husband, and we made the decision together that it was a wise idea to say we're not a great fit. I do hope you find that great fit for you. And so sorry that this didn't work out. And it was hard to do because I was not in the position. I didn't want to turn away clients.
I just can't imagine discussing with a vendor what it would look like to bring them to court before they had even... Wild. Like, okay, and this circles back to if you don't trust a vendor that much, you shouldn't be hiring them.
You shouldn't.
But I think that your contract, anyone would have had those clauses. I mean,
yeah. And that's what I said, and I just was, I believe, like we've said before, and never burn a bridge, but we just had to step away. And I did feel bad. I felt like we connected with the girl. The girl was really excited. She seemed like she really wanted us there. But unfortunately, I wasn't willing to make that sacrifice. And potentially, I just think after the fact in those situations, like the wedding day probably would have been fine. Everything, the images probably would have been great.
But you don't know.
And there's just, it was too much of a risk. And I think, honestly, it has, like I said, it was really hard to say no and turn that down. And it was at a point where I didn't want to turn down clients. I was like, we can't turn down clients.
No, but I get that.
I'm really thankful that I did.
Do you have like a client that you can think of that's like a specific story in this like past 6 months or so where you were like, yes, this is what I want?
Yeah, absolutely. Give them a shout out too. Tanner and Malik, man.
Was that your library wedding?
It was my library wedding.
That was gorgeous. Very fun.
It will go down as probably my favorite wedding. Oh, I shouldn't say that. I love all my weddings, but I will say stylistically how the day laid out, the trust, the communication, everything just came together. And it was such a great team of vendors too, that it just was amazing. And also the bride and the groom had a vision and were really, really prepared to make the time sacrifices for that to be able to happen.
Yeah, no, that makes sense.
To give us time, like you were saying. It was like to give us that time.
Yes.
And it was phenomenal. It'll be, it's one of my favorites. It's just incredible.
Most of our experience, I feel like, leans towards weddings. How do you think that kind of conversation would apply to a creative business that's not a wedding? Like, do you think it's the same? Do you think they should be looking out for different things? Like if someone's a graphic designer or or a painter. I don't know. Even a hairstylist. Like, do you feel like it's similar or?
I think it is similar.
Mhm.
I think it's so funny because I do look at a lot of people's websites and not just photographers, but every kind of creative business. And I've seen where some people even go as far to say on their website, I've seen, hey, we don't work with jerks. And I think it's kind of funny. I think you're setting you're setting the tone already. You're really, really putting it out there that we do good work and we want to work with good people.
That's funny because that kind of verbiage on websites really turns me off whenever I see
hilarious.
it. So I don't think it's a problem per se, but I think it's really interesting that for you, that's like, you're like, that is great. I love seeing that.
I do. It's not on my website, but I think it's really amazing. I think it's, like I said, that's clear communication and sets an expectation. And I think that type of attitude is also going to maybe they don't work with everybody. Maybe they do turn down some clients, or maybe some clients see that and don't like that and they go to someone else, you know? And I think it's okay. I think learning that, it's so hard. It's so hard when you're starting out to think that, right? Like to think that you might turn away clients or you might not work with everybody.
Yes.
But I think learning that frees you up to be the best that you can be for the clients that you do have.
Well, and I think another hard element for especially early on is realizing, and we touched on this some in episode 1. I feel like we even touched on it some in episode 2 with our discussion with Peyton. But like everything comes back so much to communication and the way you're communicating with your clients. I have a joke that I kind of crack really in most of my client calls. That's kind of like, I don't want to, it's a lot nicer than this. And I don't even remember what it is because it's like, I wouldn't say those calls are scripted, but I kind of have like things that I say and I have to like, but it's kind of like,
it's like an email template.
I don't want a Pinterest board. Like you're not going to send me a Pinterest board. I will take ideas and suggestions because it's their day and I want it to be about them.
Yeah.
To the point that I just take the aspect of like, it's more about their day than my art. So if something's not going well for my art, that's too bad because it's their day.
Yeah.
I still want the images to be good, but like, I'm going to pick their experience over that anytime. That being said, like, do not send me a Pinterest board. Like, just don't. I might glance at it.
Yeah.
Typically when people are sending me something like this, and I tell clients this in this early call, it's like, you don't see what I see when you're sending me this. So you're sending me something and it might be that you're just suggesting poses, but I'm seeing like this huge range of image styles.
I agree. If I look at it, I'm like, but what do you like about the image?
Do you like the editing? Do you like the Scotland hills?
Right. Do you like the close-up shots? Do you like the
grain?
Right.
And
it could be a million things.
I think it's really easy though to have those conversations up front with someone in a nice way, not in like an arrogant, I know about this art and you don't.
Yeah.
But like to have those conversations with my clients where I'm like, are there any specific poses that you really want to see during the day? Are there any moments that you don't think I'm going to think to capture that are important to you? Tell me those things. Is there anything that when you were walking through the venue, you were like, this is insane. This is why I booked this place. I want to know those things. And then from there, we're going to get better images than if you just send me a Pinterest board full of photos.
100%.
And then I've taken a client who might not be an ideal client, quote unquote, if we hadn't had that conversation.
Right.
And suddenly they can be because they understand like what I'm doing and how much I'm caring for them.
Yeah. And then I think they have questions like to think about because they may have never thought about that.
Well, actually, this is something I've been doing in my like wedding details meeting is I have been asking if they care about certain images, like a dress shot. Because I don't like photographing a dress shot.
Yeah.
I think it kind of looks like a ghost floating around. And so I've started saying like, hey, do you want me to arrive in time to take a dress shot? And I would say 60% of the time they go, no, I don't really understand those photos. And then guess what? I've gotten rid of an image I hate taking. And they have more time that I'm photographing them getting ready. I'm not spending 15 minutes on something they didn't want.
Yeah.
And then if they want a dress shot, great. I'm going to do a dress shot.
Right.
And because I do them less often, it's not as boring.
Right.
Because I'm like,
You have
ooh,
more creativity.
a little bit of a challenge.
Yeah.
I don't know. I just feel
That's
like
a great way to put it, though.
I think we can take clients that don't feel super ideal, and by being good business owners who care about them, they can become ideal. Yeah. And that's my take.
I agree. I absolutely agree. And it's up to us to cultivate that, right? There's some times where, they're not going to be your ideal client. They're trying to talk you down. They're trying to change your contract. They're trying to do crazy things.
And if someone's trying to talk down your pricing, that's their problem. That's not yours. Unless it's every single person that talks to you, and then
maybe
in which
check
case,
yourself.
Yes,
that's a whole nother episode. Pricing.
Yes, we will definitely touch on that soon.
That's awesome. Well, I love it.
Is there anything else you want to add to that, though?
I don't think so. I think we covered it. I think it's really an important conversation to have, whether internally at your business, with other peers too. I think that's a really, really great place to start too if you don't know what your ideal client is.
I will add one more thing.
Yes.
Your ideal client is not someone else's ideal client.
Amen.
Because like I just said, mine honestly can all be categorized down to like that. Like a lot of those nuanced things. I like small weddings. I like joyful, fun people who want me to just float around taking photos of them and then do like a 30-minute portrait session. Great. Yeah. But some people, that's not ideal for them. They want more structure. They want more rules. They want more, hey, we're going
to
pose and take these very formal shots. And that's great because that client also exists out there that wants those photos.
Yes, absolutely.
So,
yeah, I do think that's why it's an important conversation to have, because it is not the same for everybody.
Yeah, because for like a long time, I think I thought an ideal client was like, I think I saw that term thrown around a lot in very specialized photographers. So they're like, my ideal client is an elopement who rock climbs. Like, and I was like, wow,
their Starbucks order is,
my ideal client is going to be like my new best friend. And I'm like, no, I genuinely, like I said, I will become friends with clients.
Right.
My ideal client is not someone who thinks I'm their new best friend.
Yeah. That's amazing. I think that's great. I think that's so good. Yeah. Figure out what your ideal client is, and it may not be what you think it is.
Yes. And it doesn't have to be detailed. Jordan's is just trust.
Yeah.
Yep. And mine's just a little ping pong ball.
And if they do book your highest package, that's plus.
Yes, I will say I think some of my best clients have picked my lowest packages. But I think that's what happens when you're drawing in clients. You're like doing small things, And that's okay. Make sure your smallest package is priced effectively. We'll talk about that next.
We will talk about that next. Well, thank you for joining us.
Yeah. I hope everyone has a great Wednesday morning or afternoon or anything like that.